Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the Orthocell Limited webinar. My name is Hayley Charters, and I'm pleased to host today's session. Shortly, Orthocell Chair John van der Wielen and CEO and MD Paul Anderson will provide an update from the company at a truly exciting stage of its commercial rollout in the US. We'll host a short Q&A towards the end of the session. You're welcome to submit your questions via the written Q&A facility at the bottom of your screens, and we'll endeavour to get to as many as possible. Please welcome John and Paul.
Good morning, and I should also say good afternoon and good evening because we've got over 300 people dialed in today, and that just displays what great progress we're making at Orthocell. We have people dialed in from all over the world, and we've now got considerable international and institutional interest in our company. My intent is to provide an overview from the board's perspective and then hand over to our Managing Director and Founder, Paul Anderson, and then we'll also take some questions. Paul's particular focus will be on the US market, and that's because that is our single biggest potential market. I would say though to investors listening today, please don't let that overshadow the significant revenue and achievements from the markets we're already in. You'll see in our quarterly result announced yesterday that we had a 28% growth in our revenue, and this growth only related to Australia, New Zealand and Singapore, and of course the known international markets for our dental product, Australia. And I'd like to start with taking us back a quick step to highlight some of the distinctive differences between Orthocell and many of the other listed biotechs or life science companies. And look, the next couple of points, whilst they roll off the tongue quite easily, they're very difficult to execute. So Orthocell has no royalty liabilities. And as we head into revenue growth, investors will reap the reward of that one statement. Liabilities relating to royalties erode margin significantly in the life science sector. And I quote again, Orthocell has no liability of royalties on this collagen-based platform. Orthocell owns the patents to its products, and we proudly manufacture those products here in Perth. The manufacture starts from a raw porcine material to the end product, and the end product is both lightweight, it does not require temperature control, and it has a 3-year shelf life. Now, what that really means is when you compare us to other life science companies, the majority outsource to a contract manufacturing organisation, which again results in margin erosion. So we have no margin erosion from royalties. We own our own manufacture, we control our costs, and we have a product that has very little volatility in terms of its production, its temperature control or delivery around the world. And as a great example, we ship this product from Australia. We can store it at low cost all over the world. It has a 3-year expiry. And what that results in is, again, low volatility, higher margin, and a product that's simpler. It's highly secure to distribute around the world. And again, that's where we see the margin benefits for investors. And these couple of points are very, very difficult for other companies to replicate. And what this really does is add to the margin, which I think you'll see becomes evident as our revenue continues to grow. And look, another financial element to focus on is that Orthocell has already sunk considerable cost to get to where it's got to today. In fact, we estimate that to be close to $80 million to get the company to the current state that it sits at. Our expenses are growing at a lower rate than our revenue. And what that really means is your revenue and cost jaws will eventually cross over and push the business into profit. Now, our focus is on the growth of revenue, but our structure of owning manufacturer and our variable cost in distribution is really important in the way you'll see our revenue, the costs reduce, and eventually the company and what we see in the foreseeable future coming into cash flow positive position. Our distribution costs are very well managed because we've got a variable cost distribution base, which Paul will highlight. And what that really means is we only pay for what we get rather than a large salaried sales force, which can be quite costly as we develop. And look, finally, I would like to state that Orthocell's board and executive have been operating under a very simple mantra. We set the strategy, we agree the strategy, we align behind it, and we communicate openly to our people and investors what we're going to deliver and then deliver against it. And I've been a great believer that if you document and commit to where you're heading, you'll align behind that and deliver against it. And I think the evidence of Orthocell in the last 2 years is that we have had a considerable success around our execution. We've been very open in stating where we're heading and then delivered against that. And so it's on this basis I ask you to listen really closely to what Paul, our Managing Director, explains regarding the USA market. And he provides details around how a company gets its product to market and then eventually into the hands of surgeons, which then produces the revenue. I want to highlight, look, Paul comes from a clinical background. He's worked in the operating suites. He's the founder of the company, and you can see over the success of the last few years, he's very, very well qualified to explain these next steps. As the chair, and I know on behalf of the board, we could not be happier with what's been achieved over the last 12 months in particular, with strong governance, rigorous financial discipline, and the record around the execution that the executive team have achieved. We do feel more positive now than we've ever felt about the company's future. It's been a significant progress in share price. It's been significant progress in terms of our revenue growth and then our approvals around the world in terms of the nerve product. We think the next steps are very, very exciting. We're lined up behind it. We've got the management team behind this, and we look forward to continued webinars and updates on the future growth. I'll stop there and look forward to taking some questions at the end, and I'll now hand over to Paul Anderson, our Managing Director.
Look, thanks very much, John, for that fantastic introduction. And thank you all participants who have joined today. It's fantastic to see so many interested in the significant progress that we've been making in the US, but globally. As John mentioned, today's presentation is really focused on our US commercialisation and what the updates are with regards to the significant achievements we've made. Including our first surgical use some 3 months after receiving FDA approval, which is an outstanding effort, and really want to sort of paint a picture of the rollout and demonstrate how that's on target for us. So it's really important to give some further background for those who are new to the story. It's really important to understand that we've just received our first surgical use some 3 months after achieving FDA. Now, to some that may seem like a long time, but to ourselves and to others in this industry, to achieve your first usage some 3 months after achieving an FDA approval is an outstanding achievement. There's a lot that has to go on in the background to enable that to happen. And so the US commercialisation is on target. The key work streams that are required have progressed, ahead of what we would have expected. And so as a result of that, we're really confident and excited about the sales ramp up in the next couple of quarters that we're going to see. We've been really delighted that we've been able to attract some of the very best distributors in the US, distributors that have domain knowledge, distributors that have significant relationships and products that they can sell that coexist really well with our product. And so to have over 14 distributors focused on the East Coast market, East Coast being the major population centres, to see that those relationships now cover over 25 states within the United States is an outstanding achievement in the short 3 months that we've been approved in market. And we've worked really hard at bringing in domain knowledge to this company. We're an outstanding company. We've got a lot of understanding about how to drive these technologies into the market, but you still need local domain knowledge. And we've been outstanding in the way that we've been able to do that. So internal sales, marketing and medical education, really closely engaged with the distributors with that deep domain knowledge, enabling us to really tailor business plans for each of the individual distributors and to target specific hospitals and specific surgeons that are going to give us the outcomes that are required to enable us to get sales force training programs and to really educate and promote the brand, which is now emerging in Orthocell. Of course, we talk about sales and we talk about distribution. One of the really key pieces that sits in behind all of this is logistics. And this is no easy task to achieve logistics in the US. And so we are now ready to fill our sales orders. We have inventory in the warehouse. We have control and coordination over processing the shipping, and we have a customer service that is now validated. And we have now over 2,000 units that have been shipped to the US ready to go. As I mentioned, having just done our first case. So we're delighted about that progress, and we're delighted to have completed that first case. And we're also now really involved in broader Remplir market development activities, really combining the outstanding surgeons that we have here in Australia, having them visit the United States to talk about their experiences, and having the United States surgeons, our key opinion leaders, such as Captain Ian Valerio, who I'll talk a little bit more as we go through the presentation, come and visit Australia. So there's this really beautiful cross-cultural relationships that are developing, leveraging up all of the expertise that we've had here in this country. And so, that really drives us now towards, how do we get high volume sales in the United States? And these streams that we've been talking about, market access. Well, number one, you need to be FDA approved. That in itself is an outstanding outcome. So we have that. We then have to go through a state licensing process. We've done that. We're now going through a hospital procurement approvals, these value assessment committees that take up to 3 to 6 months. So we're well advanced with these major hospitals in doing that. And to do that, you need to have the backing of key opinion leaders. You need to have the backing of key doctors within those hospitals. And for us to achieve that really means this value assessment committee, the VAC process, is a much easier and linear process. We're also in the process of onboarding our ASCs, which for those who don't know, these are day surgery hospitals. These are hospitals where patients come in, they have their operations and they leave in the same day. And that's where our first case was done within these ASCs. These are really, really important hospital bases for us to achieve the goals that we need to. We've had a really successful product launch in the US, and we've been able to understand what the customer segmentation is. We've got a very strong pricing policy that has parity in pricing globally, which is a really important piece moving forward in this geopolitical world we live in. So we know our pricing's right. We know our pricing's come in just below the competition, which means that we've got a pricing leverage. It's a premium product, but we are making decisions easy for hospitals to bring our product in. We've got an outstanding medical education program. We've been working over the last 2 years with outstanding doctors here, honing that medical education program. We've now taken to that US and further honed that with a focus on the American market. We have a strong compliance system, and we have incredible visibility over surgeons' use and surgeons' use of products and surgical use. And so the US is very transparent in what its doctor does. And so that enables you to key account plan at a much, much higher level than is possible in Australia. So we've been delighted to be able to target and pursue the right key opinion leaders and the right surgeons, again, to enable us to get high volume sales. And so we have KOLs, and early user adoption continues. We have continued product awareness and promotion through conferences and tours. And, we've had our Chief Scientific Officer recently on tour with our business development group, seeing some 10 hospitals and surgeons in a 2-week span. So we continue to also, in complement to that, develop clinical data and support adoption. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that as we go through the presentation. Really importantly, I mentioned domain knowledge. And so we've been able to attract some of the very, very best for our US team. They've come from our competitors. They've come from this nerve space. And again, that word domain knowledge, I can't emphasize how important that is an indicator of success. If you can attract some of the best in the country, that means you've got a product of worth and you've got a product that surgeons are going to use. I mentioned that we're focused on the East Coast. That's the major population centres within the US. And so for us to have 14 distributors that covering, in excess of 21 different states now, we've paused that process. We understand that you can't be scattergun. We've got 14 distributors to train and educate. They have over 100 reps on the ground. It's really important that we provide them with the very best education that we can to support the product and to drive our brand within that market. We have the warehousing and logistics, as I mentioned, and that's very easy, as John mentioned before, about easy words to say, very complex and difficult to achieve. And we've done that outstandingly here from Australia. which enables us to continue to sales forecast and to manufacture and to distribute into that US marketplace. We've already done trial runs with our invoicing systems, and so we're ready to invoice to pay. And of course, we have really importantly performance metrics and reporting. And let's be clear, the domain knowledge that we bring in, the experience that we have in Orthocell enabled us to be really KPI focused to enable us to address and to assess our performance metrics in our reporting. So just that's by way of background and all the setup that we have as we move into the US marketplace. And so let's now talk a little bit about Remplir. Bring some of the guests that are in today's chat up to speed with what we've got in front of us from a product. And it really is redefining nerve repair. And again, these words roll off the tongue very easily, but we are actively redefining the way surgeons approach nerve repair. Not only are we redefining the way that they're operating, we're also redefining the way that they understand what we're doing. And to have surgeons talk to me and to say to me, Paul, your scientific narrative is outstanding. The team has been fantastic in their growth of this product understanding. I now, as a surgeon, understand why previously I was getting unpredictable and inconsistent results. And your scientific narrative is now driving me towards wanting to use a product called Remplir that provides us with compression-free protection of the nerve that generates the ideal microenvironment. And so we have a product that's easy to use. We have the only product in the world today that mimics the outside edge of the nerve called the epineurium. It reduces the need for sutures or negates the need for sutures. And this, as you see as I go through the presentation, is a really, really important piece. And what happens as a result of these outstanding handling qualities, a reduction in the surgical time, a product that's actually physically designed to mimic the nerve itself, that reduces sutures. And what we see there is that we're able to guide predictable outcomes in peripheral nerve repair. We're returning nerves to their pre-injury state. And so, again, let's talk about the evidence. Let's talk about what it is that's driven this product, the fantastic product launch in Australia, and driven the ability for us to gain great key opinion leader and centre of excellence support in preparation for our US rollout. The grey area that you can see here on the baseline is no function. So these are patients that we're treating that had no voluntary movement, either their hands or their limbs. And what we've seen in our clinical studies that we've now published in a very reputable journal and forming a foundation for the drive of this technology into the US is that we're taking patients with no voluntary movement, and we're at 2 years post-operatively, which is the time point which is relevant for nerve repair, we're seeing an 85% return of voluntary removement with improved strength and range of motion. And this is an outstanding outcome. And when you have surgeons of the quality and the expertise and the international reputation of Dr. Alex O'Byrne here in Australia telling us that we're now seeing consistent return of arm and hand function following surgery with Remplir, increasing the success rate and efficiency, not to be misunderstood, the efficiency of nerve transfer surgery. These are outstanding outcomes that really represent everything that Remplir has to offer. We've continued to build the evidence base. You do not rest on your laurels. You do not say, we've got one clinical study, we're really happy, let's just move into the market. You have to continue to develop evidence base. And our major competitor in this space is sutures. And so we recently released interim results from a new study that was evaluating the impact of sutures on nerve regeneration and functional recovery. And what that showed us was that when you use Remplir, when compared against sutures, we had an earlier return to function, higher quality nerve regeneration, restoration of nerve structure with no inflammatory response. So these interim results have been presented at a medical conference and have been prepared for publication. And what that means is that the compelling results form a cornerstone for this medical education efforts within the United States. And this is a really important part about what we do, and that is continued evidence development. So the indications for Remplir is one of the only products in the market today that enables surgeons to connect nerves together, to protect nerves from scar tissue and compression, and to cap nerves that have been severed in amputations. So there's 3 key indications there, all under the one product label. As a result of that, we now have over 200 surgeons. In fact, the number's about 206 surgeons in over 166 hospitals, incorporating plastic reconstructive surgeons, orthopedic surgeons, and vascular surgeons, and even neurological surgeons who are now using our product, repairing nerves with Remplir. And so an outstanding product launch in Australia, which has given us an incredible knowledge base and learnings that we now are translating into the US marketplace. And so just to give you some further background, what is it about suturing that causes problems? And we know one of the first publications around suturing was actually in the late 1800s. And believe it or not, we're still predominantly doing the same thing today, trying to join nerves together using a suture. And those pictures that you can see on the right-hand side there, where those yellow dots are where the suture has gone through the nerve. And the darker tissue that sits around that is the scar tissue associated with the suturing. So not only is suturing technically different, it induces a foreign body reaction. It leads to suboptimal axonal regeneration and return to function and sensation. So this is the unpredictable, the inconsistent clinical results that clinicians are seeing. And when you're doing an operation that on average it only sees success rates between 50 and 70% at the very best, then you know that we have to change. We know that we needed to find a better solution. So as a consequence of that knowledge, we've seen other companies come into the marketplace, the Axogens and the Integras of this world. We know that their products, they haven't developed them themselves. They're generic products. They don't have scientific narratives that we have, and their products are not ideally fit for purpose. And what you can see with the current devices, they do not degrade and they do not integrate at the same time as our product. They do not have the handling qualities of Remplir, and they are most certainly not designed to mimic the epineurial tissue. So we see this dark tissue in the middle here as the encapsulation of the product. It's not degrading very well, it's causing inflammation, and it's actually compressing the nerve. Again, it doesn't integrate into the native tissue, again providing us with poor outcome, inconsistent and unpredictable clinical outcome, as compared with Remplir on the right here, where you can see total integration, mimicking the epineurial tissue, giving great confidence and understanding as to why we're seeing better results than needles and threads, and why we're seeing better results than the current conjugates that are currently out there. And they're really only, these devices are really only currently used in 10% of procedures. So that represents an outstanding opportunity for this company as we move into the US marketplace. You know, we've spoken about manufacturing, so important. You know, we're not now, you know, getting into the market and saying, hey, we now need to go and raise capital to build a new facility. We have done that. Our facility has over 100,000 unit capacity. And so we're really delighted that we have an incredible GMP manufacturing facility here in place in Western Australia. We're delighted that we have a really sophisticated and well-educated workforce that thrive on building this product and understanding that we're making a difference to patients' lives. We've worked really hard over the last 18 months to make sure that we've got the logistics and shipping in place. We've shipped our first 1,000 units, and we're just about to ship an additional 1,000 units to ship from Australia. So we've got product in place. We have warehousing and ordering fulfillment in place in conjunction with customer service. So really a very complete logistics and shipping. And in the background, we've got a great team that's been working on that. We've also been working on the last 2 years in particular on our US market rollout. You don't just get an FDA approval and expect things to happen. You have to be working ahead of the game. And we've been doing that with our internal sales and medical education team, combined with our external distributor network. So a sophisticated sales and med ed team focusing on sales, on medical education and marketing, to enable us to educate our distributor network, to in turn enable them to convince surgeons to use our product. So this is a defined and specific program that started almost 2 years ago. This is an actual picture of our manufacturing capacity. We have the capacity to deliver volumes through our current scenarios that drive us towards profitability as a company. We've spoken about the capacity. We understand that the near-term requirements are. We've increased our capacity to fit those requirements. And as we always like to do, we're trying to see ahead of the game. So we're also now optimizing and automating the processes that we have in place to give us further leverage with these product that we're developing that we're producing in this. And I might also add, just finally on production, that we have a medical device single audit program audit and MDR quality standards. Now, these are two of the very highest standards achievable in medical manufacturing in the world today, and we have that. We have that. And so we sit at the very highest level. I mentioned about our inventory, and I won't go too much further into this, but it's really important to understand that there's a lot of work that gets done here. And people, if you put your order in by 2 o'clock today, you'll receive the product the next morning. And that's the type of services that we've introduced into the United States, that we can do just-in-time delivery, as well as advanced order fulfillment processes that have now been validated and in place with our partner Unifile, which is a fantastic company to have dealt with. So let's really talk now about our first 14 distributors that we've engaged with. This is a hybrid sales model. This is a model that incorporates some direct sales for ourselves. We currently have 5 direct sales in place, people in place to manage our regional sales focus. We're focused on the US, laser focused on the US and Australia. And it's really with these 14 distributors. And what's really important about these 14 distributors, that they're based in the major population centres across the East Coast. And that represents over 100 sales representatives on the ground. And so we've been able to get a critical mass now of distributors in place, with the Orthocell internal team working to bring them up to speed to represent the product and the brand, working with the distributors on a tailored business plans for each of those distributors to identify who are the key hospitals and who are the key surgeons, and to sell those, to train those representatives with our scientific narrative, which provides us with the leverage in the marketplace. And so we have now East Coast directors appointed with imminent completion of head of sales, medical affairs, and marketing. So 5 people in place already, with a further number of internal people to appoint. What's important to note here, even the very biggest companies in the country, the Strikers, the Biomeds and the like, they all have hybrid models. No one has a direct sales force completely in the United States. It's just too big. And so that's a really important part. So we continue to invest in medical education initiatives. We've recently had our 3rd annual nerve repair and reconstruction symposium, and you can see here, Natasha and Tanya and Raj and Sally and Ian and Alex. These are world leaders in the field of nerve repair. These groups are educating surgeons in Australia. They're educating surgeons in the US. And Dr. Valerio is a professor from Harvard University. He's a very senior surgeon in trauma at Massachusetts General, 2 of the very highest level hospitals. He's now joined as our key opinion leader, our medical and scientific advisory board. He's a US Navy captain, which gives us that strong military connection. And he is completely enamored by our product and our science and our narrative behind that. So to have surgeons of that nature being willing to sacrifice their time to travel to Australia, we had 2 significant events. One, we had 47 surgeons, and the other, we had 27 surgeons undergoing a cadaveric training. So these are outstanding gilt-edged medical education focuses with comprehensive understandings of advanced techniques, conducting, really incredible scenarios. And I would really encourage all of you, as we post this presentation, to get onto the long shorts with Orthocell, Captain Valerio and OCC's nerve repair device. He speaks about the impact that this product can have in the American marketplace. And I really encourage you to have a listen to what he had to say on that presentation. John, do you want to talk a little bit about this slide?
Nothing like being radically ready, Paul. Yeah, look, I think something we're particularly proud of in this slide and in our initiative was the fact that we did a humanitarian delivery of the nerve product into Ukraine. And whilst we can't disclose the people that carried out the surgery, what we can let you know is it's one of the defence forces around the world who took our product into Ukraine and has fundamentally used the product on amputations. So for us, one, to do the right thing by the community, rally behind what's going on in Ukraine, but 2, for people to see the need and want to use it in such an emergency situation is just further validation of the product and its ability to change lives. So, it's something that the team were really proud of, and it was worth highlighting.
Yeah, thanks, John. I mean, absolutely. And you know, we're extremely proud of the fact that our product is changing people's lives. We're proud of the fact that surgeons want to use our product. And we're extremely proud of the fact that, you know, that our product has been designed to be used in a war zone scenario. And you know, that's a picture there of John and the ambassador from the Ukraine, you know, celebrating that fact. And so we're delighted to have that adjunct. And finally, before I hand back to John, you know, really about redefining nerve repair with Remplir. And you can see here the US market clearance and pre-launch has been achieved. The appointment of initial US distributors has been achieved. You know, we've been delighted that, you know, we've achieved, you know, the Hong Kong and Thai product registrations ahead of time, and they've come quite, you know, much more rapidly than when we first thought. You know, we're delighted that we've been able to achieve our first surgical sale, you know, ahead of where we thought we would be. And so, you know, these are significant achievements that over the last period that I think you'll all agree have been, you know, a really strong catalyst in our share price growth. But this is only the beginning. This is really only the beginning. We have this incredible, you know, our first US sale, you know, some 3 months after getting approval, you know, an outstanding, or the usage was 3 minutes, 3 months after our first surgical use. And we're really looking forward to now the rolling of significant US sales. We're looking forward to the appointment of further sales team members to manage our distribution partners. You know, we've appointed our first distributors in new markets and looking to do that in Canada and Hong Kong and Thailand, and we're actively involved in that process right now. And of course, let's not forget about the EU and the UK. These are significant markets for us. And we'll be submitting into those markets in Q4. And of course, another sleeper market, which is not often known, but Brazil is a very big market for nerve repair as well. A large middle class, very sophisticated medical approaches. So EU, UK and Brazil are the submissions we've lodged, but we're really laser focused on our US development. And we're laser focused on also increasing our development into the markets that we've moved into. And let's be clear about Canada, Hong Kong, Thailand, Singapore. What that does for us, the UK, Brazil, FDA, Canada, what that does for us is provides a significant global footprint that adds value not only to our revenue potential, but most importantly at this stage of development is our commercial footprint, is the ability to increase value of this incredible asset that we have that sits in front of us, that is Remplir. And they're the catalysts that we've achieved and the ones that we're looking to achieve moving forward. And I'll finally hand back to John to wrap it up with the last slide before we take some questions.
Thanks, Paul. And I look forward to taking some questions. But I think in summary, you've seen the quarterly growth rate at 9%, quarter on quarter now for nearly 3 years. We anticipate that growth rate will start to increase. In the next few quarters, we'll bring online the US revenue, and then we'll stick to a well-defined plan of controlling that growth, rolling out the products to all those new markets that we have approval in, and then using that rigorous financial discipline to make sure that the company balances its cash flow with its growth and then continues to execute on the plans ahead. I think, you know, we've spent the last 18 months talking about where we're heading. We've got to where we are today by great execution. We'll continue with that execution. And we really are now on the threshold of significant growth. So I'll stop there and look forward to answering a few of the questions that I'm sure people online have. So I'll hand back to you, Hayley.
Sorry, gents, there's lots coming in. We'll get them sorted. We're just organising them. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. We're now moving to the Q&A section. If you would like to use the question, we do have a lot coming in at the bottom of our screens right now, but I'll kick off with one in relation to revenue. What sales revenue are you expecting from the US in H1 financial year 2026?
Oh, look, I'll jump in and take that. We clearly are not going to make forward projections. The best way to look at it is we provided a revenue update. We've still got our quarterly to produce in the coming days. The best way to state it is we now are in the US, we've got distributors lined up. You will see the revenue come in over the next few quarters. And I expect that means that our current growth rate will increase based on the US revenue that will come in over the next quarters.
Thank you, John. A question from Michael L on chat. When does the company expect to appoint further Remplir distributors in the US?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the presentation, we've had an incredibly busy program with 14 distributors focused on, in that East Coast, the major population centres. We're very conscious of not to get ahead of ourselves. We're very conscious that you need to invest in each of those distributors. So we're now going through with those distributors an education program, business plan development, to enable us to maximise those approaches. This is not a slash and burn approach. This is an approach that invests time and energy into education and educating those distributors. So we are now sourcing those distributors on the West Coast, and we expect to double the number of distributors and double the number of representatives on the ground. But as it stands today, we're focusing on those 14 that we have. And so we think that that's a judicious and appropriate way forward. So sourcing what the next phase are, but really concentrating on the ones that we have in front of us today.
Thank you, Paul. And just a question from Jason. Can you address broadly the US health insurance / patient reimbursement landscape for Remplir?
Yeah, that's a really important question. When we talk about Remplir about products and reimbursement, and so the US is an incredibly large market, and so it has a huge user pay scenario. And let's just take, by example, Oxygen, who have over $120 million worth of revenue as one of our comparators and competitors. They don't have reimbursement. And so these ASCs and the hospitals, they have what's called a DRG system in a lot of the hospitals, where there's a bundle of cash that is, or capital that is used for each individual operation. And so you can then access reimbursement through the DRG systems without having your product absolutely reimbursed. And of course, we work towards that. And that takes some time in the US, but that is not a limiting factor with our revenue growth. It's not a limiting factor with the reach of our product. And so great question, very complex in its presentation, but the take-home message is that there is enormous revenues to be gained, even if you don't have reimbursement in the US.
Thank you, Paul. A question from Jared on email that came through earlier today. Does the appointment of multiple distributors across the US mean that a major distribution deal is no longer a possibility? Additionally, is it possible at a later date because they would also use current distributors?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's an excellent question. And so we've crafted the distribution relationships and the contracts to make sure that that is not inhibitive to us doing a deal. And so these are, at the start, they're yearly contracts. They can be broken if there is a deal that comes across, and that is clearly delineated in the contracts. And so we don't want to put ourselves in a hole where we can't do deals because of our distribution partners. And this is a common practice in the US. The distribution partners that we have on the ground are used to that scenario. So in answer to your question, no, it certainly does not inhibit us in any way, shape or form.
And just moving to other jurisdictions. Sorry, John, you go.
Sorry, Hayley, I'll just jump in there too. I think really important for investors to understand the best way to generate a deal in distribution is have a larger volume of revenue already in place. So could we have done a distribution deal? I would say to you, possibly. The company would prefer to have large revenue in place in the US first before we did a distribution deal, because it will be more lucrative to do it that way. So just to enhance what Paul's already said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. And just moving to other jurisdictions now, when will we see sales contributions from the likes of Thailand, Hong Kong, Canada, other approved markets?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, look, we were pleasantly surprised. Our strategy here was to increase our global footprint. We saw such an outstanding recognition of that with the Singaporean approval. We've now seen Singaporean patients being treated with Remplir. We wanted to have a footprint with Thailand and Canada and Hong Kong, and those approvals came so much more rapidly than we expected. And so, we were still expecting to be going through that process. And so what I want to ensure is that we recognise that there is a market there that we can capitalise on. But the main game here is in the United States. If we were to take our eyes off the United States and focus on some of these smaller jurisdictions, that would not be the best interest of the company. So we're highly focused on the US. We're laser focused on educating the distributors that we have to generate revenue in the largest healthcare market in the world. But at the same time, we've appointed a chief commercial officer whose job it is, and part of his role is to make sure that we get the very best distribution partners in Thailand, in Hong Kong and Canada and these other jurisdictions. So whilst we're laser focused on the US marketplace, in the background, we're still working through appointment of distributors there, and we certainly are excited about those commercial opportunities, but they will come in turn.
Great. And just another cash question. It is steadily ticking down. Will you need to raise capital soon?
Yeah, look, I'll take that one. I think you'll see the cash burn is reducing, the revenue is increasing, and we believe we have more than enough to take the business forward. And I think our usage of cash is actually been very, very well executed. We're conscious of the sunk cost. People should look at the sunk cost at Orthocell is already in the main there. Our revenue is growing. In fact, when we'll report what our annual revenue is now, will be well over 9 million, and that's growing at a very decent rate. So no, we're not looking to raise any cash, and we have more than adequate resources to keep the company, on a very even keel for the future.
A manufacturing question next, gents. Does it make sense to continue this activity in Australia?
I love that question, and thank you for it. We're passionate manufacturers of this product here in Australia. We're not passionate because we're blinded by our own speak and talk. We're passionate because it's the right place to manufacture this product. We've got the best raw material in the world, and we've validated that. We have a great gross margin for this product to enable us to manufacture it here. We've got great scales of economy in our facility that we have here. It would most definitely be more expensive to manufacture this product in the United States. We have a unique product that can be shipped, that's got a 3-year expiry date. We have a unique product that doesn't require significant temperature control. And so we've worked really hard at making sure that our manufacturing platform is appropriate here in this country. We've worked really hard to make sure that our cost of goods are appropriate to enable this to happen. So the answer to that question is that we will continue to grow our manufacturing capacity and capability in this country, and we will continue to ship globally from Australia, taking advantage of all that Australia has to offer from a manufacturing perspective.
Brilliant, Paul. When will Orthocell be profitable?
Again, we're not going to state that too outrightly. The focus at the moment is on revenue, and that's where we'll generate the best value for the company. The costs are sunk. Our expenses are growing at a lower rate than our revenue is growing. So we see profitability in that sense on the foreseeable future, but our focus is on revenue growth. I go back to my earlier points that what investors should look at, because we own our manufacture, because we distribute from Australia and it's got the long shelf life, and because the majority of the cost is sunk and we don't have royalties, our margins are very healthy. Therefore, profitability for us is less of a concern than making sure we maximise the ability to grow as much as we can on revenue. But I'm very confident that profitability is achieved in under 2 years.
Thanks, John. Just another revenue question that's popped up earlier. Is revenue from the June quarter representative of your revenue run rate now?
Well, of course, it's evident of the run rate now because they're the actual results produced. I think the most optimistic way to analyse the revenue going forward is, as we've highlighted, that is from Singapore, Australia and New Zealand in Remplir, and then our existing growth in the nerve product from Striate. So we expect that the growth rate will increase over the coming quarters as we bring on US and then other countries later in the year.
A couple more just coming up to time. US expansion plan. How many staff do you have in the US? Aren't they expensive costs to take on?
Yeah, look, we have 5 staff in the US currently in place. We have medical education, sales, and we have marketing. They're the three key hires. All of those three key hires have come from one of our competitors. They bring significant domain knowledge with them. Certainly wages and salaries are higher in the US than they are here, but they're not prohibitive in the development of this technology. We've complemented those three key hires with marketing support and territory sales managers. And so we currently have 5 employees in the US, and that'll probably expand to about 7. We'll cap it there and service our distributors with those significant resources that we put in place. Yes, they cost more, and that costs more to add those, but this is the enabler. This is the driver of our business. And so we're excited about the talent that we've been able to attract, and we're excited about our growing revenues. That makes it much easier for us to make these decisions and to employ these really key infrastructure hires within the US.
Thanks, Paul. And just a final question, should we expect to continue to see regulatory approvals for new jurisdictions for Remplir?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have a focus on the EU, UK and Brazilian markets. And we're also investigating India and other markets as well. So in the background, whilst we're laser focused in the US, of course, we're looking at global domination with this product. When you have a product of this higher quality, when you have a product that's making this much impact to both surgeons and patients, it's incumbent on us to make sure that we can have a global reach. So the answer is yes. The answer is that we are looking at these further jurisdictions, but our initial focus is on the UK, Europe and Brazil.
Gents, thank you so much for your presentation today. A good news Australian medtech biotech story in the making. Thank you to everybody who's joined us on our line, our valued shareholders and supporters. That now concludes today's webinar. You're welcome to email us questions. We'll endeavour to get back to you. Thank you for your support.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.